To be frank, it just makes me embarrassed to be British. It's just staggering.
Are we just too lily-livered? You know, is it a political correctness thing?
It seems like we need some Trump energy over there. Okay, from the start, President Trump is promises made, promises kept.
It is a grotesque insult to the victims of the 7th of October massacres.
It's October 7th, a day that will live in infamy for any human with a head and a heart. The deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust didn't just start a war in Gaza. It exposed a moral fracture in the West. Remember those chants? Ceasefire now. Well, there is a ceasefire deal on the table now, and it's been met with silence. Where are the celebs? Where are the Instagram activists, the humanitarians? If it was really about peace, they'd be demanding Hamas take this deal. But it was never about peace. It was about hate. The scum who raped and murdered Israelis are now being celebrated on Western streets, under police protection and under trade union banners. There's no clearer sign to me that the West has lost its way than the 2-year anniversary of October 7th being marked not with sombre reflection, but cosplaying, Keffiyeh-wearing Hamas sympathisers taken to campuses. British students have been chanting, "Israel is Arab, intifada, intifada." Let's see it. And tonight, a group named Inflinching 87, the year that Hamas was formed, have been granted permission by the British government to march through London. Tonight, I'm joined by extremism expert Lord Walney, Times journalist Iain Martin and commentator Adrienne Gray to discuss all this. Lord Walney, you were the government's former advisor on extremism. You can't possibly conclude that they've failed to put a lid on this.
That's right. There's a lot of debate about, do the police have enough powers to stop certain protests? I don't think they do, but they absolutely have the power to stop this. It is a grotesque insult to the victims of the 7th of October massacres. Jewish people are reeling from the attacks last week, and Inflinching 1987. I mean, it's absolutely clear.
Just for listeners and viewers that won't understand the significance of that, explain that. Inflinching 87, obviously the first Intifada, the Palestinian wave of bombings across the world, was launched in 97.
Yep.
The year of Hamas. Who are these guys? Why the hell are they not prescribed?
And what you often get in these circumstances is the police will say, yes, but there can be a number of meanings to these words.
What, like the word jihad, when they said a number of words for the word jihad?
It can mean a struggle.
Yeah, or it could be the name of the guy.
It could be an inner spiritual struggle.
Yeah.
It is absolutely clear in this context, Inflinching 1987, on the anniversary of 7th of October, with all that anger, that is about an armed struggle. That is about support for Hamas. The police absolutely have the power to stop that and to charge people. And what the Home Secretary should be doing tonight is she should be on the phone to Sir Mark Rowley, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, demanding to know why the police are allowing this demonstration with conditions, rather than saying, on your bike, I'm going to the Home Secretary, I'm going to the government to get this stopped.
Yeah, Martin, the British government in various guises under Conservatives and then Labour have been struggling for this. What is this sort of damage do you think this does to the public's perception of the government? It looks completely powerless right now to stop a sewer of hatred rolling through the streets.
Well, it does. I mean, to be frank, it just makes me embarrassed to be British. It's just staggering that this is happening. On a basic level of humanity, just what's the thought process like that you think on today of all days, considering what happened 2 years ago, you think today is the day where I'm going to go out on the streets? And you saw in those images people are actually laughing and enjoying it and treating it like sport. The original sin with this, Britain is facing this disaster because after those horrific attacks on October the 7th, there was a failure of nerve by the then Conservative government. And other governments, like the French and the Germans, did behave more robustly in those couple of weeks afterwards and just said, our cities are not going to be turned over to this sick sport every weekend or every other weekend. And every time those groups tried to, individual cities in France, for example, just said, local authorities said it's not going to be happen. A national decision was taken on that basis. And of course, France has its own anti-Semitism problem. But in Britain, a catastrophic mistake was made somewhere between the police and the government, and these marches started, this sort of festival of hate, and it now culminates on the second anniversary with this happening on the streets of our capital city. It's just
former British Home Secretary Sir Braverman was all but sacked for calling these hate marches. Yeah. How do we, John, on the language around this, are we just too lily-livered? You know, is it a political correctness thing, or is the law just completely so badly drafted? How do we fix this beyond toughening up our rhetoric?
I think we've been taken in by the idea that this is all about peace in the Middle East. Sure, it is for some of the people who turn up, but there is a core, and there's a core of these marchers whom this is about a hatred of Israel that actually spills over into a hatred of Jewish people. And you've seen that with the criminality, the support for terrorism around the edges of those marches. And yes, there was not nearly enough done early on to say no to this, but also the law is lacking here, because what Jewish community leaders have been saying for well over a year now, and I've been backing them up with a report to government, that actually they shouldn't have to put up with this week after week. The right to protest is sacrosanct, and sometimes there are going to be protests on issues that people like, and sometimes in ways that they don't like. But they do not need, and they should not have a right to be out on the street every week, making those city centres a misery and a place of intimidation for Jewish people. And the government can come forward and change the law. They've made an announcement at the weekend, but what they've actually done...
Slightly woolly announcement.
What they've actually done, yes, they're talking about the issue, which is good, but they've said that they are going to change the law. Actually, in the areas that they've talked about, the law has already been changed within the last couple of years. They are not going far enough, because what they need to say is that on a day like this, a protest should not be able to go ahead at all. And they're not saying that. They're only saying, oh, well, we'll change the street, or we'll change the time. It's not good enough.
Adrienne, Donald Trump wouldn't put up with this sort of thing, would he? You've had your own anti-Semitic problems on US campuses. But, you know, the streets of Washington tonight, the streets of New York aren't blighted by these sorts of protests. How's it different?
Yeah, from hearing from you guys, it seems like we need some Trump energy over there. Okay, we've been fighting this narrative. We've been fighting all of these protests that, by the way, become dangerous more often than not. They're burning cities down there. You know, so we've been cutting through the narrative because there's been a rise in anti-Semitism, as you said, on the college campuses, everywhere like that. And I think in American media, it's been particularly challenging because we have people that have platforms, influencers, and we have people that are funded by people to say certain things that are anti-Semitic. So we've been really fighting that, but President Trump has stood strong, fighting against this narrative from day one, and it sounds like you guys need a little bit of that energy over there.
Iain, what does Donald Trump energy look like in Britain? Have they, you know, who is the one to fix this? I mean, it seems to me that the government, you know, as Lord Walney was saying there, are just sort of, you know, making noises but not actually doing anything.
Well, there's this guy called Nigel Farage.
A regular discussion on the topic of discussion on this show, it has to be said.
He thinks it might be him, that he thinks he might be the answer. But it is, yeah, you can see a scenario. It's another policy area in the UK where if the mainstream parties who are collapsing, I mean, essentially, you know, the Tories are down, who are having their conference this week in Manchester, down at, I don't know what, 12 to 14 points in the polls. Labour are collapsing as well. If they don't have an entirely new approach to this kind of problem, it's not just this, it's the small boats crisis, you know, a whole wave of other kind of problems afflicting Britain, then if they can't fix these problems, it's clear that voters are going to look to someone who can. Now, it's a whole other complicated discussion about whether Nigel Farage can do that. I'm sceptical about whether he can implement a highly, you know, complicated policy program and deliver. He's a brilliant showman. But that's a slightly different question. At the moment, about a third to 40% of voters in the UK see this kind of stuff, these appalling scenes today, and essentially say enough. And the old party system seems incapable of adapting and dealing with these problems because of this sort of thicket of human rights laws, the way in which our judiciary has developed, just decades and decades of this, that you can't then eventually have a leader who just says, right, stop, enough.
Adrienne, I mean, Donald Trump is sending the National Guard to Washington. He's trying to send it into Chicago. We've seen violent attacks on ICE centres in Portland, in Texas. Political violence isn't just on the streets of London. Explain to us a little bit about how Donald Trump has reacted to it, where the sort of political dividing lines are in the US, and what the UK could take from what that Trump energy looks like.
Well, the Trump energy is he's going to call it like it is. And he has said multiple times, this is domestic terrorism, and it's associated with the left. Look, the bullets are flying in one direction. The houses are being burned. The cities are being burned down from one direction. So when you see a repeated pattern over and over and over, he says, this is domestic terrorism, it's of the left, and we're done. And he creates an action item, and he signs off on it, and he proceeds to just follow through with what he says. And from the start, President Trump is promises made, promises kept. Whether it's immigration, terrorism, whatever have you, he's going to move forward. He's trying to solve for the peace right now in Israel and Hamas and all of that. He's trying to bring peace in the Middle East. And believe me, he's working hard. He said he almost has all the Arab nations on board. Well, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Lord Walney, you've again straying into your area of expertise across this. Is this domestic political terrorism we're seeing on both sides of the pond, or is the Trump rhetoric a little bit overcooked? Or this is what we should be declaring on the streets of London?
I think
these people are terrorists.
I think thus far we have been fortunate that the extremism and aggression that we've seen in London so far in the main has not gone as far as the appalling scenes that we have seen, for example, in Portland,
in Texas,
where genuinely areas have become a no-go zone. They've been quasi-militarised, people with covering their identities, all black military, black bloc tactics.
Now, Antifa in their combats and hats. And, well, who's paying for these? Well, that's where the money coming from as well. Who is, these people? Who is funding them? That's sort of, who is paying them to not be at work but to be sitting outside ICE centres all day? And do you suspect there's sort of outside influence in this?
Yeah, well, hostile states to the West, to America and the UK, have long for many decades have sought to fund and foment discontent. It's an age-old tactic, and it is really important, I think, that our agencies can try to follow the money. Who
are we really talking about here?
Right, so you have got Iran as a chief
agitator, organiser, funder.
Exactly, certainly in the UK, where there is levels of funding that is going into community organisations, to charities, the IRGC, which have been prescribed properly as a terrorist organisation here, but not in the UK. They are active, and it is a genuine, on one level, violent threat on our streets, but then on the other, there is that wave of being able to pump resources and energy into extremist organisations because they want to see us tearing ourselves apart, and they want to see good people losing heart in the West, and that is what you are seeing. So it's vital that we can push back against
Martin,
this.
Why haven't the British government not prescribed the Iranian Revolutionary Guard as a sort of an enemy, when the Americans have? There was also wishy-washy talk of allowing communications and back-channel diplomacy, but it does look a little bit bizarre that we're out on a limb here.
Yeah, so clearly a mistake. Just on that financial point, though, I think the thing which is not properly understood in the UK is the way in which the funding for a lot of those groups is not really transparent, right? So I'm not accusing. There are all sorts of
Back to the days of Moscow Gold funding the peaceniks, is it?
There are all sorts of legitimate NGOs who don't do this. So I'm not saying every NGO, but when you speak to people in the system that there are ways in which money can come, through a bank account in Malta, through France, then through now, even despite money laundering rules. And what does a donation really mean? Where does it come from? Where did it originate?
Follow the money.
Yeah.
And I stress again, I'm not saying every NGO in the UK, which there are many, but
are we playing
something.
catch up on this? Is the state completely, obviously, Adrienne, Donald Trump has threatened to outlaw Antifa, to ban them and say they're a terrorist organisation, but how do we even define who these people are? You know, is there organised blocks, or are there sort of, you know, useful idiots going along with it? Getting mixed up in it. How does Donald Trump define, how you say, Antifa, for example?
Well, it's a well-oiled machine. We've learned that. I mean, they come out, they have posters, T-shirts made quicker than anyone, right? They have weapons, and so we've learned that's a well-oiled machine. And I believe there's a money trail, and we can follow it, and that's exactly what he's doing. And that's what we have our agencies for, right? To do the work that we necessarily wouldn't be able to uncover, but I think that they will, and I think we're a lot farther in the investigation than we know.
John McCook, you've had a long dive into this. Has the British state been caught snapping at the wheel?
We are too slow. One of the reasons I was brought into government to look at this was because there is just not anything like the understanding that there should be of the far left in this country, and the ways in which they can organise and the ways in which they can channel money. And then you look at our institutions that are supposed to push back at this. Look at the Charity Commission, for example. It has a budget, I think, of around £50 million a year. It has a number of investigations where there is absolutely grievous evidence of wrongdoing of Iranian-backed organisations, the Dar al-Hekma Trust, the Al-Bahar Foundation. These have been going on for years, and nothing is happening. And these organisations can carry on while they're doing it, and others get the message that actually Britain can be a soft touch, and that is another thing that has got to change.
And a long list of reasons, a long list of Britain being a soft touch on various things.